众朋友，大家早，欢迎收看今天上午的华尔街论坛，我是维人。在上个礼拜呢，我们跟这个 Jimmy 有了一个非常深入的探讨，就是在梅根跟哈利他们的爆炸性访问之后，给英国皇室的内部带来许多危机之外呢，其实令非常多的大英国协在目前的君主制度是不是应该受到重新的检视，也是重新的让大家把焦点放到这个议题上面。那对于君主制到底它如果说要废除的话，要经过一些什么样子的法律程序？在上个礼拜呢，其实 Jimmy 是给我们了一个非常非常完整，并且是非常这个 technical 的一些解释，让我们知道在加拿大是说要把君主制废除掉，基本上呢是 mission impossible， 基本上是不可能的。那对于皇室到底在目前的加拿大的整个的运作当中扮演一个什么样子的角色，以及君主制在常年在加拿大为什么还是可以保持一个比较受欢迎的一个民调，以及在最近的这2个月，从今年初到目前为止，我们看到其实有部分对于皇室是比较不友善的一些民调，这当中对君主制在加拿大所造成的一些危机，以及对于整个皇室在其他的大英国协底下所面临到的危机会有一些什么样子的处理方式，或者是未来可能会面临到的一些挑战。我们今天就请到了英国皇家的，应该说皇室英联邦社团底下的一名非常重要的一名角色，就是Mr. Shawn Wade， 他是拥有法律的一个学士，是皇家的英联邦协会低陆分会的总裁跟首席执行官，同时呢，他也是一名预备役的陆军官员以及青年拓展的领袖，在社区服务有超过30年的历史。所以我现在呢，就是要introduce Mr. Shawn Wade. I'm sure you understood everything I just talked about.
Very little. 你好. Good morning.
That's very great. I think that our audience understood as well. So I just did a little introduction of the organization, RCS, and also your background. We know you have very extensive background in the community, especially with the youth. So I think the topic today is relatively heavy, I do feel like. So why don't we start with I guess a more relevant question, which is, I'm sure you watched Meghan and Harry's interview 2 weeks ago. What's your personal take? Do you think that was a good move for Meghan and Harry?
Wow. Wow. I mean, I'm not sure that it's ever a good move to do that sort of thing. I mean, I don't quite know what the purpose of it was. I watched it, and I mean, they got out of the royal family let them leave. They were free to leave. I don't really see what the point of it was. I mean, it's sort of, okay, why we left, perhaps that makes some sense. It was a 2-hour interview, was very extensive. I think it was kind of maybe 6 months or a year too late to sort of say we're leaving the royal family and this is why. I suppose they waited a year as per the original agreement with Buckingham Palace. It is interesting that they seem to have concluded some deals with Netflix and places that they seem to be going into the media services business. And it's strange that they had the interview just before some of these things came to light. I don't know. Maybe these things take time to arrange. I think also, for some reason, it seems to have been lost on everyone, not the media in Britain and not a lot of other people, I think, but Duke of Edinburgh was very, very sick. We didn't know whether he'd make it or not. I mean, we don't know what procedure he had in the hospital. The man's 99. He had some kind of surgery, possibly another stent put in. When this interview was going on, I mean, it must not have been easy on the Queen. And if the Duke of Edinburgh was in hospital watching this, it's not good for someone that's had heart surgery to see something which is going to give you great stress. I suspect it was kept from him for a while. But so you got to question the timing. And I mean, I know these things, again, you've got Oprah there, you've got the media there. You can't just, oh, sorry, Oprah, can we do this in a month when the Duke of Edinburgh either passes away or when he's feeling better? So I understand that from when you set a wheel in motion, sometimes you can't stop it. But the timing is questionable, I think. It depends what their agenda is. Is it to set the record straight? Is it to say we're angry and we're not going to take it anymore? Is it to damage the monarchy, or was it for their own personal commercial benefit? I mean, I think you could say all four things play into this. And what's the major weighting? I fully expect a tell-all book at some point. It usually happens. I've heard there may be a reality TV show coming out of some of their business ventures. If that's true, I mean, this is a great kind of product launch. So I don't know whether this was for to talk about their future in wherever that is in America commercially, or to put the record straight on the past. So I guess if they want to put their case and become famous, I guess it was a great move for them. Is it good for the monarchy? No. Does it portray them in a necessarily good light? No. But I think what happens is it divides people, some who will support you, some who don't like you or disagree with you, some who maybe liked you before and have moved over to the I don't like you camp, some who may not like you but may have sympathy with you. So I think as any issue today, you can slice it and dice it as many ways as you have people. I think it's like an onion. It's like wedge. It's a kind of wedge politics, you might say, or wedge marketing. So I think that there's as many answers to that question as there are people to answer. I think in general, for the institution that they claim to love, I think it was very bad. I think for them personally, it may be very good on many levels.
Mm-hmm. So I do have to, I guess, reflect a little bit. I think amongst my friend circle, I can see a very clear divide of how people perceive and react to the interview. I think the younger generation, growing up, they already kind of question, what's the point of having the queen on the coins and what does she actually do? And now with, I'm sure you're aware, beginning of the year, there's this big scandal with Governor General, and she resigned earlier this year as well. And now with Meghan Harris interview, which is like you said, it's not really, it's rather damning for the royal. And there is a divide of support and between the younger and the older generation. So do you see that divide? And I know you work extensively in the youth group with young people. What's your perception of how they see the royals? And do you think the series of events in a way damage how they feel about royal for the long term?
It's a good question. Well, I think if you look at Queen Victoria, who reigned not quite as long as our current queen, she went through periods of great unpopularity and great periods of popularity near the end of her reign, as much for her longevity. I think if you go back to the times of King George's, the monarchy was not particularly, it was quite scandalous. Some aspects were scandalous during the Georgian period, particularly the time of George IV, preceded the Queen Victoria by about 30 years. So this could be a period where the monarchy had been doing very well for a period of 15 or 20 years. This could be a rocky patch that they've hit. Now, the Governor General is the Queen's representative in Canada. However, Her Majesty does not, she appoints the Governor General on the advice of the Dominion, or in this case, the Canadian Prime Minister. So the Governor General's problem has nothing to do, she represents the crown, the monarchy, but she has nothing to do with the Queen personally or with the idea of having the monarchy. This issue with the Governor General is we're not a political organization, but is 100% the problem of the government of Canada. The previous Governor General was excellent, stayed an extra year, and that's fine. And the previous government created a formula for choosing the Governor General. They had proposed and created a committee to choose future vice-regal nominees. There was an election, that government lost, the new government came to power, and they decided that not to implement this or to scrap it, and they were going to go and do their own system for appointing the Governor General. Okay, that's new government, new agenda. The system was clearly flawed. I think a former prime minister made one phone call to vet this person, a very poor investigation into this person's background. You wouldn't hire someone to work for your newspaper or for your media outlet based on the kind of due diligence that they seem to have done in this person's case. Looked at her resume, made one call to confirm, and there you are. You give her one of the most important jobs in the country. So the scandal is that she was had problems where she had worked before, so she was a bit of a road accident waiting to happen. But she fit the government's political agenda, and it was seen that this would suit the government's political agenda, or whatever. Whoever made the call thought this was the right person for the job. I don't know what happens with the government of Canada. So I would separate that from the institution of the crown. The fact is that she was terrible, she didn't do a very good job for a very long time. She didn't want to do aspects of the job. She was terribly briefed. So not only did you pick a person maybe you shouldn't have picked for the job, you probably didn't train her properly. And she didn't clearly understand the aspect of being Governor General. If someone doesn't want to start handing out awards or having people come to Rideau Hall or travel the country when we could travel the country to promote the Governor General and the various things that the Crown does, why are you Governor General? I mean, that's the job. The job is to meet people from all walks of life, to go travel the country, to have people come to Rideau Hall to meet you because they want to see you and they want to see the country. It showcases the country. That's what the monarchy does. It showcases the people and it showcases the country. Richard Wagner, the famous composer and philosopher, in one of his many essays wrote "A free crown and a free people." So the monarchy in so many ways is a symbol of the people, but also a way of guarding people's freedom against an overarching, in his case, aristocracy, in this case, an overarching business class. One of the problems in America is you have a bunch of very wealthy people who dominate and control things. And because there's no hereditary head of state there's no apex at the social pyramid. Everyone wants to be president. Everyone wants to dominate and control. And so you see a bunch of rich people sometimes out of control in a republic. In a monarchy, there's kind of a constitutional safeguard. And that kind of, keeps, keeps sort of a lid on things. It's apolitical. It's at the top. You can't just seize the top power of the state and do what you want, which you can in a republic. So that's the difference between a monarchy and a republic. And with the Governor General, she didn't seem to understand that element of her job. Adrian Clarkson was a journalist and was a very good Governor General. Donald Johnson was an academic, a constitutional scholar, and a wonderful Governor General. Romeo LeBlanc was a parliamentarian, wasn't a bad Governor General. His son runs the government of Canada now. He's Justin Trudeau's right-hand man. And of course, Raina Titian was, again, a politician. I think he was Speaker of the House of Commons. He was a very good Governor General. So these people understood the role. They went out to meet the people. People came to them. They were respected. They were people you could respect. So they were chosen, and they were the right person for the job. This other person maybe wasn't the right person for the job, certainly wasn't trained, didn't have a background in it. And so the problems that happened at Rideau Hall with bullying and stuff like that, and there were allegations that maybe Meghan bullied some of her staff as well. Anyways, when a person doesn't fit into the job and they don't do the job properly, it's going to bring scandal onto the institution. However, I think people in the street may not see the difference, but I think that has hurt the institution of the Crown temporarily. Perhaps we'll get a new Governor General and then they'll forget all about Julie Payette. So that people tend to have a short memory on stuff like that. I think there is, within the younger generation, a questioning of authority, which is quite normal for youth. I think, particularly with some of the millennial generation, they have this, what do I say? They have a different perspective on things. They're almost as aggressive as say the 60s baby boomers were. They have this kind of, okay, boorish, but they have this kind of, the world revolves around me. And so they want it done their way. And if it isn't done their way, they've been used to getting their own way and pushing. And this could be the Meghan factor here. I don't know. But so I think with younger people, some of them generally don't always support the Crown anyway. Some do, some don't. And I think there's a few things that they don't like about it. And over time, because the Crown endures, because the Crown tends to evolve over time, and that's why it stayed, I believe that there will be a way forward where the Crown, I mean, look at Prince Harry and Prince William and Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Today, they're presenting shamrocks to the Irish Guards. Happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way. And so they'll present shamrocks to the Irish Guards, the new Wolfhound, Seamus, etc. So they'll be doing their constitutional duty. You look at their children, you look at some of the younger royals, even Prince Edward, who runs the Duke of Edinburgh Awards now. They go out there in the community and they work with people, and it kind of evolves over time a little bit. And so I think this will happen a little bit. I say there's some older people who are not happy with the monarchy. There's some younger people who love the monarchy. I think among the teenagers, as if they give the Crown much thought at all, some of them like it, some of them don't. I think the 20 and 30 somethings, because they start to think about politics, they may or may not like it. I think there's a general dislike of all establishment institutions among people in that age group, partly due to their age, partly due to the fact they're a more liberal generation than, say, my generation was, which we were a little more conservative. So I think over time, the institution of the crown tends to endure, and I think their support for it will come, that people tend to see the value of the monarchy over time. It has, so I would say one thing, they can't sit on their laurels. They have to be ever vigilant. They have to be ever careful trying to do the right thing. It's not about doing the popular thing. It's not about being trendy. It's about doing the right thing. And that's something the Queen has done throughout her nearly 70 years on the throne. And God willing, the Queen will have her Jubilee year next year, 70 years we've never had. So let's hope that for the Jubilee, things can be pulled together and the popularity of the crown will increase next year. It generally does in Jubilee years.
It's an interesting comparison because the popularity of the Queen over the year, it has only increased, but how people want to recognize the head of the state doesn't seem to align with her popularity. I know in one of our proposed questions is how popular is the monarch amongst Canadians over the years. And I did a little research. Please correct me if my numbers are wrong. I think one of the more recent survey from the Vancouver-based firm Research Code says 45% of the responders, they would prefer to have an elected head of the state. And comparing to the same time last year, that's like a 13% jump, which is, I don't know how much Julia Prietti has to play a part into this, but what a general trend is that amongst you said the liberal generation, the young people, they're how they see themselves in this monarchy has diminished over the years. And also there's another report, I believe it's from the National Post. Over the past 5 years, people, they're increasingly not want to recognize the Queen as the head of the state, even though people love her, people think she's doing a great job. And also pose a question of what's going to happen once the Queen retires. Do people like whoever else is in the family, who's the next in line, who we all know who that's going to be. The popularity doesn't seem to be sustainable for the royal amongst public opinion. So I want to go back to, if these are the polls and these are people's opinions, do you think that would, in a long run, affect how the royal, their position, I guess in a more romantic way in people's hearts, and in a more technical term, would their popularity, from what you've seen, the trend, diminish to a way that maybe one day people will have to go through the legal route and eventually abolish this whole system?
So a lot of questions. I think public opinion polls are snapshots in time. That one was conducted at a time when there was a whole Julie Payette controversy. Probably a fallout, the Meghan and Harry interview was coming. There were some other little problems in the family as well. I will note that I would imagine if you would have looked at the numbers in the 10 years previous to that, when the previous government was in office, who had an agenda of promoting Canada's constitutional monarchy, I think you would have seen support for the crown had grown. You had the Diamond Jubilee in 2012. I think you've seen since 2016 a new government with a new agenda in office, and certainly you have a different prime minister with a different focus. I think he's a son of a former prime minister who probably was no particular fan of the monarchy, and I think he has implemented in many of his father's policies. We're not political here, but this is history. I think the fact is that they chose this governor general with, I think, it's recognized less than optimal due diligence. They're more interested in their political agenda than in preserving traditional Canadian institutions. They've unleashed a couple of conversations and self-examinations of Canada and Canadians. They're not that interested in Canada's history in as much as it justifies, I think, their wherever they want to move the country forward. I think the fact that they've stopped giving out free pictures of the Queen to schools and public institutions pretty much tells you in a snapshot where they may be going. And some of us we're lobbying hard for the traditional Jubilee medals to be issued next year. We're not sure where we are with that. So I think you see a government that may be indeed or in fact pursuing a closet Republican agenda, softening up public opinion for an eventual, they tried this in Australia for a while, for eventually trying to abolish the monarchy for their own purposes. And I bring you back to Richard Wagner's idea of a free crown and a free people. The monarchy, one of the reasons the working class likes the monarchy so much is they see that the crown stops all of the, at one time it was aristocrats, but then now it's the business class from, elbowing out and just looking out for themselves and their own friends in the affairs of state. They look after the people. They're there for the people. It's a very good non-political, apolitical symbol. I think the younger generation honestly does not understand our political system because they've not been instructed. The people who taught them were taught by the same people who were educated in the 70s. I think this goes back to, again, the 1970s and some of the stuff that was going on in this country in the late 60s, early 70s. And I think the teachers were not taught properly. They were taught by people who did not like our institutions of government. I think if you look at the younger generation, they're far more apt to dislike all elements of our political system, including the way we elect our MPs and our entire system of government. I think if you talk to some of the younger people, some of them don't, many of them in Canada hate the Americans, dislike the Americans very strongly, but really they consider themselves global citizens, citizens of the world, as opposed to citizens of any one country. So I got a Canadian passport, I got a British passport, but really I'm a citizen of the world. So their whole world is that little cell phone thing they hold in their hands, and that's their view. So they have a very world view. I live in Canada, but I buy these kind of clothes, I buy this kind of food, I do whatever with other vegans, with other meat eaters, with other people who wear polo, with other people who wear American Eagle, whatever the thing is. So I think you see a kind of deconstruction of the elements of the state, of the elements of nationalism, the elements of national identity. And the monarchy is very much bound up in Canada's identity as a nation, although people have tried to deny this. The people have tried to create, I think, a false sense of Canadian nationhood. They've neglected our British and traditional antecedents because it doesn't fit with their view of the world. So you've got some very powerful people here pushing their own agenda through the media, through whatever. And I think the crown, because it's a symbol of continuity, it's a symbol that can stand for all people, it really gets in the way of some of what these people are trying to do. So I think there's a danger there, but the mechanics of getting rid of the monarchy are such that I never say never, but I don't think it would ever happen, because there has to be, in each province of this country, there has to be, they all have to agree. I would say in the modern context, you'd have to have a referendum, probably with majorities in all parts of the country. You would then have to have a series of constitutional conferences. And if you go back to 1864, the Quebec conferences and the Charlottetown conferences, that were 5 or 6 of these colonies in British North America got together to form the original Dominion of Canada. Newfoundland stayed out. British Columbia was still a crown colony for many more years. Some countries stayed out initially. Manitoba came in 1871. So it took a lot for these countries to get together, these colonies to join us as Canada in the 1860s. So you'd have to open up the Constitution, and no premier of British Columbia, Alberta, or Quebec worth their salt who didn't want to get lynched by their publics would be able to go through this process without grabbing far more powers for their regions in their country, which means you'd have a very weak federal government. British Columbia wouldn't settle for anything less in power than Quebec has. Quebec would want almost complete autonomy within Canada. They have power over immigration. They probably would want more freedom and individuality. So you'd have a very weak federal structure, a very decentralized Canada, which might not be a bad thing, but I don't think the federal government would ever basically surrender that kind of power to the provinces. So I think the mechanics of doing this are very, very, getting everyone to agree and then having everyone agree to the trade-offs, I think are very remote. I mean, the previous prime minister didn't really want to save the monarchy, but he wanted to patriate the Constitution in the 1980s. So 4 or 5 of the premiers didn't really want to go along with it, but they said, okay, so if you get this Constitution, if you get your bill of your Charter of Rights and your Supreme Court power over Parliament, the quid pro quo is the monarchy stays and certain other things which the provinces wanted stayed. And the impasse was for a long time the government didn't want to do this. And in the end, the previous Prime Minister Trudeau opted to have his constitution in exchange for some things that maybe he didn't like, such as retaining the monarchy in its present state. So the monarchy is entrenched in the Canadian Constitution. When I went to law school, I never liked the Canadian Constitution that much. I didn't like that whole process growing up. But anyways, I read it, it's like, whoa, this is really entrenched in here. The Charter of Rights is entrenched in here, but so is the monarchy and the office of Governor General. So you really can't change that realistically. So I don't think it's necessarily going to happen. If people don't like the institution, they'll put up with it because changing is far more trouble than keeping it going. And the other changes that will bring along in its wake are not changes that they would necessarily want to see. And nobody really understands how government works here. Like the Queen retains an awful lot of and perhaps you heard this last week, but the Queen retains an awful lot of prerogative powers, very ill-defined powers. We saw in British Columbia in 2018, where a school friend of mine was our premier, and she lost. There was a minority government. She lost a vote of confidence in the legislature, and seemed rather reluctant to leave office. And so, first she said she didn't want to resign. Then she suggested an election. And anyways, the lieutenant governor of the day was forced to decide whether to dissolve the legislature and have an election, even though we'd had an election, to ask the other person if they could form a government or to in effect fire the premier. So she exercised her constitutional prerogatives and asked the leader of the opposition, who with support of the Green Party, if they would form a government. He said yes, and he was the government for a few years, and then they won fresh elections recently. So I'm not sure, unless you sat there with a whole, telephone book of rules, whether people would really willingly allow that to, you would have to take these powers, which are somewhat ill-defined, and codify them, because an elected person would just use them for their own ends. So once you started delving into changing the system, the average person, oh, well, just leave it, it's too complicated. But even the constitutional lawyers would say it would be difficult to change. So I think that works in the Crown's favor, but the Crown has to earn its bread like everybody else. So they've got to keep working on trying to build some popularity, build bridges, build support among the young. And I think they're trying. But I think, we don't know what the future will bring. I think that it will endure. I think people will come to a realization that this is not a bad institution. People will forget about the Governor General's controversy. This government may grow up or may be replaced with another government which might be a little less inclined to try and change everything at once. And I think life will carry on.
Okay, so I think the discussion me and Jimmy had last week was heavily focusing on just how technically impossible if you want to remove the monarch from the existing system, which is, I'm sure, like for me, it was very new, and I'm sure I'm not alone. Just like you said, a lot of the Canadians, they don't really understand how the political system works. I definitely learned a lot of new things last week with my conversation with Jimmy. So I think this this poll of people after, I guess, the scandal earlier this year, and with Meghan and Harry, it reflects people in a way they don't understand how the system works, and in a way that's probably a responsibility that the royals have in order to push what they stands for, what they represent, and for people to fully understand. And I understand your point of it also is very sensitive when it comes to the party in power, how they have their different agenda, how they decide to promote what they think is the optimum benefit to their own calculation. I think it all ties into this very complicated framework that we're facing. So like you said, the poll is in front of us, and the system is very solid. It's not going to change anytime soon. So what do you think an organization like yours can bring, I guess, shed more light in this issue, and to connect more with especially the younger generation, even though they have like a more liberal agenda, more liberal ways of thinking? And when you think of the monarch, it's rather conservative, right? So how do you make it popular amongst the young people? And how do you think with this fallout of with Meghan and Harry, like how damaging do you think it's going to be, and how much of a damage control can be done?
Wow. Okay, lots of things. Well, we promote education fellowships. So obviously, that's one of the things we do. We aren't the Monarchist League. There's the Monarchist League of Canada, and they do promoting Canada's constitutional monarchy. But the Queen is Queen of Canada and head of the Commonwealth. So that's the perspective that we take. We promote certain occasions. We did dedicated. I started out. Well, one of my big projects for the branch was we dedicated a tree in Queen Elizabeth Park named after the Queen Mother, not Queen Elizabeth, for the Queen's Golden Jubilee. We rededicated it for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, the second plaque, and we had a special 90th birthday party for the Queen called Party in the Park, and we had a bunch of school children there, school choirs, lieutenant governor came to 2 out of the 3 things. So we have integrated younger children in a lot of what we do. We do outreach. We explain when I give public talks, I explain that she is head of the Commonwealth, and without doing the Monarchist League work for them, I go out and I explain some of the roles of the Crown in the state. And so I think that's one thing we can do. We can promote good governance. We can promote the good things. I talk about the Commonwealth parliamentary system with the Queen at its apex, cabinet government parliamentary responsibility. And I mean, that's a revelation to some people. I think some people don't even know how Parliament works. So education is really key, and I agree. But educating people or trying to tell people about their system of government, technically that's a government responsibility. And it's education policy, and it should be done by teachers. But government has not, I think, properly done this from the Queen on role of the Queen on down to what the dog catcher does in your community. So I think that's part of the problem. I think the teachers are not taught, and I think some of the teachers, I know social studies teachers who do a wonderful job of communicating stuff. Kids do role plays for trials. This is how I got my start in law. They'll put a historic figure on trial, so they learn about, essentially about history and about the legal system. There are university mock parliaments or high school mock parliaments. So there are examples for kids to learn about the system of government. And there are a lot of people who do a wonderful job of teaching people, but there are an awful lot of people. I remember in grade 11, grade 10 or grade 11, we learned about Parliament. I love my social studies teacher. He was a great guy, but he did explain it, but he kind of, the Senate, they sleep. Well, yeah, maybe the Senate is a little boring, but it is an important institution of the Canadian Parliament, like our House of Lords, basically. So I think a little bit of what the institutions do. We did go to the legislature in that class. We saw our provincial parliament in action. So we did study it, but maybe a better job of educating people and educating them from a civics perspective, not that, well, the government should do this or shouldn't do that, but just going through the steps of what the government does. I mean, some of these institutions, I know the Parliament in Great Britain, I follow it, particularly the House of Lords, and they have some very interesting things on their website about what the House of Lords does, get involved in a committee, that sort of thing. So civic engagement, they try. And I think the key is from the monarchy on down, there needs to be more civic engagement. Buckingham Palace has a royal channel, there's royal websites. So the Crown does try to engage. Now in Canada, that the Governor General should do more of it. They try. I think the institutions of government at all levels are remote. And I think they need to engage more with people, but I think the teachers need to be taught. And I think that goes to the universities. I think that falls to individual people have to decide, we're going to learn about our system, where they need to be taught. And we need to go out there and evangelize or communicate about our system of government, whether it's the monarchy, whether it's Parliament, whether it's free speech. And that's not been done for the last 30 or 40 years. It's a very poor job has been done communicating to people. And you've got generation or two brought up in effect ignorance. I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but just absolute ignorance about all elements of our government. I think it's very bad for civil society in a democracy at a time when our democracies are under threat by, be it the government, communist governments or Russia, or even within forces within that seek to pervert our democracy. The similar things happened in the United States, where one group didn't like the results of the election. I agree partly with them, but I don't know that some of what they did in December or January was acceptable. But someone can say, well, I don't agree with the election, so I'm not going to accept the results. And this has happened in many countries that are not as strongly democratic as Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, the United States even. And it's very bad for our society. So this goes beyond the monarchy. The monarchy is at the apex, and it's famous, and it's also a sitting duck. It's not political. The crown can only do so much to defend itself. All the queen's horses and all the queen's men have to ride to her defense. I'm one of the queen's horses or one of the queen's men. But seriously, I serve in the military as well part-time, or have in the cadet program. So it's our job to defend the institution. They can only do so much. The government can do a little bit more to defend itself. Individual politicians or people in business or people in non-for-profits are much more free to speak their mind. So we need to educate people, all of us in civil society, about our benefits of our the kind of open society that we live in, of which I might add the crown is at the apex. So it's not just the monarchy, it's all aspects of civil society. And it's kind of boring, but I think there's a way of, I always try to make it fun and engaging, because I particularly talk to audiences, teenage audiences, because I do, we've done conferences over the years with the Royal Commonwealth Society, and I always give a talk on the Commonwealth and what it is. And I talk about the three Commonwealth commonalities of law, language, and legislative. So the language of Shakespeare, Churchill, and Mandela, English languages, even though it's a quarter of the world's landmass and a third of its people, English is the language we use in the Commonwealth, and it's the global language, it's the lingua franca, right? A lot of people in China, 很多中国人说英语, right? So lots of Chinese people speak English, just in case you didn't understand my Mandarin. So simultaneous translation, when the guest starts doing simultaneous translation, is bad, right? But
like, what do I do? Do I need to be here, or just let the guest just?
Of course you need to be here. You have to ask the questions. But everyone speaks English. So there's that. There's a lot, the common law, of which again the Queen is at the apex, royal justice, but the law of precedent, and then of course legislative, the Parliament, the responsible government, cabinet government, of which again the Queen is at the apex, the monarchy is at the apex, the crown. So you have to. I try to explain this to audiences, young and old, and I try to do it in a fun way. But I think that those conversations and those sorts of explanations need to happen, or else there's a very real danger that some guy is going to go on the internet and give you a story. Some people say that the Donald Trump phenomenon, I don't know. And you're going to believe anything because he's, as our great premier, W.A.C. Bennett, leader of my party many years ago, premier of our province from 1952 to 1972, used to say, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I used to think that was silly when I was younger. The more I go through life, the more I realize if you don't have principles and understanding and you don't believe in something, you'll believe anything that someone tells you. And I think if the crown doesn't defend itself, if we don't defend our institutions of government and tell people about it and educate them, people will believe anything. And partly the disaffection with the crown, partly some of the problems that the younger generation have is because I don't think they've really been taught these things all that well, or they haven't investigated them very well. And so they believing people, some people want to destroy this institution. And if you don't have the background, you can't say, oh yeah, I agree, or this is terrible, this is right, this is wrong. So I think there's a bit of an educational knowledge gap. Modern education, I mean, I think I'm not that great with technology, I'll be honest with you. So I learned stuff. And I have a pretty good memory. I can use Google as well, and Facebook and all that good stuff. But I think modern education is not about so much knowledge, but knowing where to find it. So I think some of the younger generation, they pull out their phone and they ask Siri or they play with Google and they ask it questions, but I don't know how well they learn a lot of knowledge base. They know a lot of technical things and they know where to find the answer. So they look it up on a website and they get the answer, and that works. But I think you need a certain amount of knowledge in here and in here. And I think that's the key to have. So the key is that the royal family perhaps needs to promote itself better. Some of the younger royals have been trotted out recently to do things, perhaps more civic engagement. I mean, Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge were out at a opening school, working with some kids that just got back from COVID the other day. So they go out in the community, they work, they engage with the younger people. So I think that's always a good thing. Perhaps there's a way of having more two-way dialogue with people. The younger generation likes the phone, they like the interactive thing. They don't necessarily want to listen to me and you and I talking at them. They want to talk to us. And so modern communications in modern society are a little bit about that. So maybe there needs to be more of that, and maybe that would engage with them. I think education, I mean, in the end, if you don't like it and you won't support it, all the education, all the propaganda in the world can't necessarily change your mind. It's you. You, the person, have to be given the facts and process the information and have to decide, yes, I like this, no, I don't. The Prince of Wales, even the Duke of Edinburgh, were into conservation decades before anybody else was. World Wildlife Federation was the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, who's 99, was a big supporter of the World Wildlife Federation. Prince of Wales with the Green Initiative, Blue Oceans Initiative in the Commonwealth. He talks about the environment all the time. So, I mean, these guys do push some of the hot button issues. Even the Prince of Wales has gone into the Green Reset, which I don't necessarily support, and almost crosses the line of going into politics, which he's still on the apolitical side of the fence, but you know, he's trying to be relevant. He's trying to engage with people, talk with some of the issues that people want to hear about. They're not just sitting in their palace wearing the crown and I look nice on that coin today. They're not just doing that, right? They actually do try to get out there and do things. The Queen, I think, is much more masterful of these are the sorts of things we do. We go out, we talk to people, we do our thing. And she has a very good rapport with people. I think if you saw Captain Sir Thomas More, the late Sir Thomas More last year in his knighthood, you actually saw a little bit of the Queen talking to him. And, you know, I wanted to meet you and we'd heard a lot about what you're doing and I wanted to congratulate you on all the money raised, and that must have been hard. So you watch her talking to him, someone from her generation, but you watch her and she has that rapport. The other ones, maybe not as much, but I think over time it will come. I believe the monarchy has time, and I think that it will come, but it's engagement. It's us who believe in the crown and believe in our institutions of government, taking it upon ourselves to promote it. They have to become a little bit more interactive, and I think over time a new way will be found forward.
And me and Jimmy touched on this a little bit last week. I think the whole conversation to me is just very, very interesting. I wonder what your take is when you are comparing the Canadian system, especially the monarch. I know one of the biggest topic we have today is like what's the importance of monarch in the Canadian system. So when you look at the two neighboring countries, Canada and US, what do you think is the benefit of the Canadian system having a monarch existing in the system comparing to what you see in the US?
Well, I can do this simply, or I could give you a long explanation.
Oh, well, let's just do the simple one.
There's no Donald Trump in Canada.
And that you think that is a directly related to the system, the Canadian have with the
you
monarch?
will get in a republic invariably someone, and I like some of what Donald Trump does, and I would probably say that I'm more of a Donald Trump supporter than some of the people he ran against. Although I didn't like a lot of what he did in the end. I'm much more fan of some of the other American presidents. But you will get in all republics a demagogue eventually, someone who will come in there and take over and purport. I mean, there's really no politics in America. It's one group of business interests and one group of rich, entitled people jockeying for power with the other. And I would argue since Ronald Reagan, you Americans have not really had a really terribly great president, maybe George Herbert Walker Bush or George W. But you guys have not really had a president that I think has necessarily been as maybe Obama tried to make the right noises, I don't know, but it seems that looking at American politics and American society, one group of people jockeys for power with the other. And at the very apex, you have a person who wins and they promote their business interests or whatever. Whereas, look at Donald Trump. He was very controversial. He and his supporters do not accept the results of that election. You have Joe Biden and his supporters, some of whom don't like Donald Trump very much, and some of them, there's a lot of division. A monarchy, you have an apolitical person at the apex of the pyramid. And as I talked about my friend Judith Guichon, the Honorable Judith Guichon, our former Lieutenant Governor, she was appointed by the Queen on the advice of the Prime Minister. She wasn't a politician. She was in business, but she was not a politician. She was there for 5 or 6 years, and at the end of her time as Lieutenant Governor, was called upon to make a very difficult constitutional call. And she wasn't a lawyer either, I might add. Now, she was a supporter had supported in her previous life, I think, the other party that was in office. she was a business person. She was inclined towards the government of the day based on her political and her business interests. But she was called upon to make an independent judgment. And she made it. She made a call. I may have been supporting the other party too, but I think in the long term, based on the Constitution and based on the way things operate and based on what was the right call, she made the right call. If she was elected by a party, I'm sorry, I'm not sure that I would trust someone to do that. The president of Italy does this all the time, but they have very little power. They just keep changing the government every 16 months or whatever. But whereas the person who is apolitical, the Queen is there all the time, but a person who's apolitical in that role can make a call. They're not looking to be reelected. They're not looking to be popular. They're looking to do the right thing. They're looking to uphold the system of government, look out for the people, and uphold the rule of the Queen. So they have, that's their agenda, the whole holistic society agenda, whereas a politician who represents a constituency, a business interest, labor group, whatever, they are put under enormous pressure by the people who put them into office to make the call, play the game. You're not going to be a director of Air Canada or you're not going to make a director of IBM when you leave office if you make this call. Whereas the monarchy or the governor general, lieutenant governor, they can make that independent call. In the United States, it's all about business. It's all about getting reelected. I mean, the second after you've been elected president twice, you can't run a third time. But I think there's always that kind of danger in a republic. I think the American political system is quite different, although it's a form of first past the post. It's quite different than the Canadian political system as far as how you choose your members of parliament or your House of Representatives and your Senate, which is elected for God's sakes. But anyways, where the real power in America lies is at the Senate. The House of Representatives is a little sandbox, but it doesn't have that much power. But I think the continuity, the apoliticalness, the fact that the agenda of the person who sits on the throne or sits in vice-regal office is all of society, not just narrow section of society. I think that's a difference. And that office, I think we saw with David Johnson when he was Governor General, you saw that with some of our previous Governor Generals, can be used as a platform for saying good things about Canada, for talking about people in our northern communities who are really neglected a lot in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut and places like that. People, we talk about the North, but we don't do, they get quite forgotten. So bringing all parts of the country into the conversation, not just the wealthy parts or the well-populated parts who can yell and scream the loudest. I think that's one of the differences of our system. So you can have someone who can look at this independently, can maybe do things that are a little unpopular, can go into places where an elected politician dare not go to, talk to people who are in dire straits because an elected politician doesn't want to protest march and doesn't want to get not elected next time. So I think you have with our system someone who can be Queen or Governor General for everyone, whereas an elected politician they will try to represent everyone, but really there'll be some people that will never accept them as their president, as their governor, because of the party differences and the differences that happen in elections. And I think when the lieutenant governor or the governor general appoints someone or throws somebody out of office, which happens from time to time, people get to them. People are people. Politics is about people. But in the end, you can be rest assured that there's probably much more objectivity that's gone into that, even if your friends get thrown out of office, and that's happened to me, than in an election situation where the party has probably or could have had some bearing or some influence on this person. So I really think that in the end, you have a head of state that's above politics. And the Queen does this very well. In the end, she's the boss. And so she stayed above politics. It's wonderful that she is as popular as she is. I hope nothing ever happens to the Queen, but it's possible if there is another, when the Prince of Wales becomes king, he will rise above that as well, and people will support him because he's doing that kind of job. He's going to do it differently than the Queen has done, but he'll be doing that job and people will see him in a different light. I mean, some people, you look at them and you think, oh my God, then they get this different job, or they get elected to something, or they get appointed to something, and you see them doing things different, and you think, wow, I never knew this person could do this way, because they're wearing a different suit, having a different job, they're in a different role. So sometimes I think even someone you think that isn't going to do a good job, you place them in this role, you give them this responsibility, and they do well. And I think that's what will happen with the monarchy. So even if the current incumbent Prince of Wales isn't as popular, should he ever become king, he, some of that will roll along with him. So that answers your question.
Right. So like elected official, they answer to, their constituent, they answer to people who vote for them, right? And for the Queen and I guess Prince of Wales, who is going to be the future king, they also answer to the people, but it's not like people can just go into the voting booth and let them know how they feel about them and pressuring them to change their way of doing things. So what's the dynamic there, and how can people trust themselves with the monarch?
Well, it's funny you should say that. One of my first degrees in history, as you may know, and one of my courses was on the Civil War and interregnum. It's funny, we have a monarchy, but it is very much a parliamentary monarchy. And people say, well, blah, blah, blah. But in a way, I mean, we had a civil war in England, and it actually had some effect in the New World here, in a little bit in the Upper Canada and in the Caribbean. So that some of that was fought out here too in those days, because there were British settlements out there. And so the king, the royal family of the time, the Stuarts, actually lost the war. And the King Charles I, actually lost his head. So there was a republic in Britain for 10 or 20 years. The guy became a dictator. He was really bad in some ways. He was not well liked. And then he died. His son took over for a little while, and he was even worse. And so General Monk, the Duke of Abercorn, watched what became the Coldstream Guards down from the south, kicked out the Long Parliament. They brought back the son of Charles II, who was much more popular than his father, and more populist. And he became king, but he was offered the crown under certain conditions. So Parliament and an accession council offers you the crown. And this particularly happened after 1688 with the Glorious Revolution, when his son or grandson or something tried to, James II or something like that. Yeah, his brother, James II was kicked out because he tried to reintroduce Catholicism. And then, of course, when William and Mary came out, you don't go beyond the unwritten and written rules of the Constitution. You wear the crown. The king is dead, God save the king. It's an unbroken chain. So from the time King George VI died on the 3rd of February, 2nd or 3rd of February 1952, even though it took several hours to let the Queen know, because she was on a royal tour in Kenya, in a remote lodge in Kenya, she was queen. Now they had an accession council that met. They gave her the throne the next day. So it's an unbroken chain, but it is with the consent of Parliament. Now, having lost their thrones and their heads at one time, there's a distant, the Windsors are distantly related to the Stuarts. There's a sort of an unbroken line to King Alfred the Great of Wessex or something. And the Queen has got a distant bloodline going back to about the 9th century there, or 10th century AD. They are very recognizing that they exist with the sufferance of Parliament and the support of the people. So the monarchy isn't a political entity the way Boris Johnson or Justin Trudeau are, having to generate support to win elections. But they realize that if they are too out of touch with what people want, people will start to question them. They'll start to cut their budgets. They'll start to say, do we need a monarchy? Their position will be threatened. So they always have to evolve. Evolution, not revolution, that is the way. And so they have to move a little bit with the times. And older members of the royal family can sometimes get away with being a little bit more old school. And the Queen Mother is probably one of the most successful members of the royal family in history. And this version of the royal family is really Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, George VI's wife, really the way she recast the monarchy after the abdication crisis of 1936. Really, this chapter of the royal family, really, this element of it goes back to Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's time. So it's the 19th century model of the royal family as kind of the model family. And that's kind of what the root of the monarchy changes, and it's rebranded and recast over time. But the monarchy, it's about the royal family being a family like any other, admittedly more important, more exalted, but they do things. Royal weddings we watch Prince Harry and Prince William at school. They got married. We see their children out and about doing certain things because they're a family like any others. At one time, the king wore the crown, was on the was on the coins, rode around in a coach, and would go lead his troops into battle. This goes back, 2,000-3,000 years. Over time, the role of the monarchies evolved. George V was the first monarch to appear on radio, and he was a very conservative fellow. The Commonwealth broadcasts at Christmas time were things that George V implemented. His Silver Jubilee in 1935 was broadcast on the newsreels. There was cameras in Westminster Abbey for the coronation of George VI in 1937. The Queen's coronation, his funeral, was televised because television was very old in 1952. Queen's coronation in 1953 was colored. A queen is crowned. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful colorized version of the Queen's coronation ceremony put on by the Rank Company. It was put on TV in black and white. It was shown in movie theaters in color. It was the first global television thing. It was shown not exactly in real time because they couldn't do that then, but it was the films were flown all over the world. It was like the first global television extravaganza in history. The second one probably being the moonshot that was as popular. So the monarchy has evolved. The Queen went from doing a broadcast on the radio to doing television. It used to be her sitting there reading her speech. Now it's quite the production that they do months in advance. It's kind of the royal year in review. She'll be talking to these regiments. She'll be working with these children. This hospital this year with COVID. Same with the Commonwealth address that she did this year. It's gone from her just reading it to a little infomercial, to a little video that shows regular people in the Commonwealth doing their things. Sometimes the royal family interacting with them. Sometimes them just doing their thing. So the monarchy has kind of evolved. There's a royal website. There's a royalty channel on Facebook or something like that, where the royals get their message out. So over time, you see the institution evolving into not a political institution, not a media institution necessarily, but certainly an institution that moves with the times, tries to change with the times, tries to adapt with the times, but it's not trendy. It's not, it's not somebody, it's not the latest Pop-Tart sensation. They're not the latest Pop-Tart sensations out there. That's not necessarily what people want from the monarchy. They want a certain continuity. They don't want three-headed Martians wearing crowns. They don't want them to be so out there that they can't relate. They want something that they can relate to. So it's always a step. I mean, I personally think the younger royals dress far too casual, and Prince William needs to wear a tie more often. Prince Harry used to dress very nicely, and now I think he dresses terribly. He seems to only have one suit, this light gray suit with this shirt, this one shirt on, and he never seems to wear a tie. He either can't afford one or he lost them. I'm sorry about that. He got a lot of money. He probably lost his ties.
It's COVID time. It's COVID time.
I'm at home. It's COVID time. Look at me.
So maybe that's what limits his wardrobe.
A shirt and a tie. I don't know. He used to have a tie. I've got pictures of him wearing ties. He has a lovely tie from the Guards that he wears all the time. So I don't know. But I mean, that's my thing. Maybe they think it addresses, helps them relate better. So maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. But they do try to evolve. And I think the monarchy is conscious that they're winning. They have an election of public opinion, you might say, or election of popular support. They have to keep trying to do their job, do their role, be the monarch for everyone. Being all things to all people is what the monarchy has to do. And 50 years ago or 60 years ago, that was a lot easier when there were only 5 channels on television. Now they go beyond the 100-channel universe. You go on the internet, you can watch, if you can speak the language, you can watch the news in Pakistan if you want. You can watch the news in Peking if you can speak Mandarin, right? You can watch the stuff from Peking every day. Peking, anyways. You can watch that anytime you want. I watch British television. Sometimes I watch stuff from Hong Kong because it's in English, but I mean, I have an interest in that. But you can watch that anytime in real time if you want to, because of the world we live in. So you've got multi-channel universe, you've got a multifaceted world. You used to have 5 kinds of soap powder on the shelf when you go to the grocery store. Now there's a whole freaking aisle. If people haven't grabbed it for COVID, same with toilet paper. I mean, it used to be like 3, well, I mean, you go into a store and there's a whole wall of things. So the world is more complicated. So an institution that tries to be one size fits all for everyone is a little harder, right? I think in tough times, and I think if you read the Queen's message last year, I think her message at Christmas time, I listened to it with COVID, I think was very, very heartfelt, was very good. I think her Commonwealth Day message was very good, talking about the people who just did their job, the people, the frontline healthcare workers who did a great job just helping, looking after people. I think that's an example of them reaching out, and in tough times, they're a very great source of strength and unity. And I think that's one of the roles of the crown. So it's a little hard to be all things to all people in the modern world, but they're trying. And I think they're conscious that they have to do that to remain relevant, to retain the support of the people. I sometimes think they do a better job of retaining the support of the people than your typical politician who falls out of favor after 10 years, if they're lucky.
And we are really happy you were able to spend an hour explaining all these different aspects I really hope we could discuss today. And I think I got a very thorough explanation of all the questions I had in mind. And I want to thank you. And I hope we can keep in touch for further other interview opportunities. So thank you so much, Mr. Wade. And now I'm going to try to translate an hour of interview with you into Chinese.
Oh dear, I'm really sorry. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm sorry my answers were a little bit long. I don't do that much of this, as you know, but I'm very happy to chat with you again on this or any other issue. I'm very much enjoyed our chat, and I look forward to chatting with you. And as I say, if I can leave you with one thing, the monarchy is a very important institution. It's something I've devoted my life to. And my devotion to the crown, I mean, I guess my family liked it. My father was in the war. My mother saw King George VI and Queen Elizabeth when they came to Canada in 1939, when she was living in Saskatchewan. And someone took her many miles and she saw them, so they waved at her from the train or something like that. And I guess I liked the crown. And my father had this coronation plate in the China cabinet, but we had the Silver Jubilee in 1977. And they gave us a little medallion from the school. And I saw the Queen coming in Ottawa, riding in a little state landau to open Parliament with the RCMP escort. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I saw her go in the Senate chamber to deliver the speech from the throne. And that was partially probably where some of this began, where I started to really like aspects of this. I thought, this is really cool. This is part of, we have this. I think one of the things we forget as people in Canada is this is ours. It's something you Americans don't have. It's something that it's a part of us. It's part of a global international system. It goes back 1,000 years or more, several thousand years, and it's wonderful. It's spectacular. I'm not a big fan of the modern Canadian flag. I prefer the old one with the red ensign. But I can honestly say that I am proud of being part of this country when I go to London. There's many things the government of this country has done since the 60s that I don't like. But when I go to London and I go to Horse Guards Parade, and on the mall there are all the flags of all the Commonwealth countries. And right there, in a very prominent post, right on the entrance of Horse Guards Parade, is the Canadian flag, with all the other flags of the Commonwealth, with Britain, with Australia, with Nauru, all these other countries. And I say, wow, yeah, we're part of this. This is us. We are part of this great international organization, the Commonwealth. This is ours. This corner of Horse Guard Parade belongs to all people. And the monarchy belongs to us in Canada. The monarchy belongs to all the realm territories and to us in the Commonwealth. And this is something that we have. It's something to hold, something to cherish, something to be proud of. Now, I know that's emotional. I know that's weepy-eyed. I know that is perhaps sentimental, but I mean, it is an organ of government. How many people say that? Some Americans get weepy about the Constitution, I guess. They weep too much, the thing will fall apart. But I mean, how many Americans or other people get that emotional about an institution of government when you think of it? So I am proud to serve Her Majesty the Queen. I am proud to be Her Majesty's subject. I am honored and proud that we have this amazing institution in this country, which I will fight to the death to preserve. And I just think it's a wonderful institution. I think it's one that needs to be preserved. Whatever is going on now, I think, it's like the weather. They say about Vancouver, as you know, and as in London, if you don't like the weather, don't worry, it'll change in 5 minutes. And I think the fortunes of the monarchy wax and wane, and God willing, as the late Sir Thomas More said, tomorrow will be better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wade, and we'll see you hopefully soon in the future.
Thank you. I'd love to do that. Thank you. Bye-bye.
好的，各位观众朋友，所以刚刚在我们1个小时的这个访问当中呢，我们跟这个 Mr. Wade 我们进行了这个1个小时访问哦。那我想各位观众朋友呢，可能如果说在英文上面大家是比较熟悉的话呢，对于他今天所讲的重点应该是都有画到了。那在今天我们这个时间其实是已经超长的情况之下呢，原本我是想说可以留大概半个小时来解释，但是我们今天有非常多的话题讨论，所以现在时间 是比较紧一些，我就做一下比较简短的一个今天问题的问答的一个回顾。可能有的观众朋友觉得说我们在上个礼拜已经跟 Jimmy 在这方面的问题是有经过讨论的，不过我想今天呢毕竟这个皇室的相关的议题是不断的发酵，而且比较有时效性的呢，就是我们刚刚有说到的在加拿大这边的这个前总督，他最近的这个丑闻实在是越来越多，所以在哈利跟梅根他们上礼拜的访问之后，其实现在加拿大内部民众的民意对于皇室还有这个君主制是不是要继续留在加拿大系统当中，我们是看到民众有非常应该说在过去5年当中态度上面的一个明显转变。那今天呢 Mr. Wade 他告诉我们的就是根据他的观察，他认为这个时间点上面的确是对于目前在加拿大内的这个体制对于皇室以及对于这个君主制呢，的确是比较没有说像以前这么的友善。那当然主要的原因呢除了跟 Meghan Harry 有个比较直接的关系之外，还有就是我想如果您不是加拿大人，您可能不是非常的熟悉，那就是加拿大的前总督 Julia 她的名字叫做 Julia Payette， 她在今年1月的时候因为有这个丑闻缠身，所以呢他就辞职了。而这当中呢在我们昨天的这个北美生活新闻当中也跟大家报告过了，他在最近新的一轮的金猪奖，也就是在等于是加拿大的一个反讽的讽刺的一个奖项，要颁给的就是非常贪腐的政府官员或者是名人，他在这个榜单上面呢是高居最高的一个位置。所以对于他所带来的在加拿大的民众当中对于皇室的损害，其实也许可能是比梅根跟哈利还要来的更严重。那这个Mr. Wade 他的意思呢，就是其实像是 Governor General 这样一个是由加拿大的总理来指派的一个职位，这当中其实必须要考量到的就是各个不同的政治党派，他们对于目前的君主制有他们自己不同的一些政治考量。像是我们知道如果看民调的话呢，基本上年轻人对于目前的君主制是比较没有信任度，而且对于是不是要继续存在下去也是存在非常大的怀疑。再一个最新看到的National Post 就是一个加拿大非常知名而且是非常具有公信力的一个报纸做出的最新的调查呢，就是在今年的2月21号做出的访问，有50%的加拿大民众他们是不认为这国家元首是英国女皇。那当然这个上个礼拜 Jimmy 已经有更正我，他说这个英国女皇她在加拿大这边是加拿大的女皇，所以她虽然是同一个人，但在不同的国家代表的是不同的意义。那对加拿大人来说呢，现在有50%的根据 National Post 他们做出的民调是已经不认为这个伊丽莎白应该是必须要我们来认证的一个国家元首。那另外还有报道呢，就是大约是有47%的民众希望在接下来可以自己来民选国家的代表。所以英国皇室还有整个君主制目前受到的确是非常大的挑战。那这当中呢今天的讨论就是其实在这当中政治的背后的这个考量是扮演一个非常重要的一个元素。目前的这个民主党以及之前的保守党，他们其实对于皇室的友善程度是不一样的，所以可以看到就是在教材还有在这个民众舆论或者是社会讨论的推广上面，也都是有不同的力道在这背后。他认为非常多的加拿大尤其是年轻人对于加拿大的整个法治的制度还有对于政府的制度其实是不了解的。这个呢我也必须要说，这个以我自己本人来说呢，对于加拿大的司法制度，当然你这个心里面觉得是一个民主法治的国家，但是这当中女皇扮演的是一个除了橡皮图章以外的一个角色，这我还真的是之前不知道。但是加拿大在今天我们看到跟美国的政治的系统上面一个比较不一样的，就是有一个君主制在这当中。那今天我觉得 Mr. Wade 他讲到一个我觉得可以拿出来画重点的呢，他就说像是川普这样的一个政治强人在加拿大是不会发生的。因为加拿大除了说今天是有民意的基础之外呢，你还必须要有一个完全没有政治倾向的一个第三方，那也就是目前是女皇或者是未来的这个君主，他必须要做出完全没有任何政治倾向的一个判断。所以比如说我们在美国看到这样的一个制衡呢，就是在法律的系统上面 对于这个大选是不是有舞弊，他们要做出一个最后的一个判决。那在加拿大这边当然也是有最高法院，但是君主在这当中呢，他也是有他的权利以及他的话语权在这当中，所以像是一个独大的在政治上面的一个 monopoly， 一个独大的情况呢，基本上在加拿大他认为在有女皇的制衡之下是不会发生的。他也强调他知道目前呢这个很多年轻人，尤其是这一代的年轻人，我想大家如果说是比较保守派的话，通常都是保皇。那如果说你今天是比较自由派，或者是这个很多观众朋友喜欢说的激进左派的话呢，那对于这种旧制下的一个制度相对是反感的。他说这个当然他可以了解哦，那不过如果说真的要去看的话呢，真的要了解为什么女皇大家听起来好像是一个很沉重而且是一个很旧制的一个制度在这边，但是女皇所代表的就是她不会因为有目前的这个政治利益的考量，所以要必须做出一些对于民众是没有这么有利的一些决定。他认为在这个体制之下呢，其实才是真正可以达到一个全面的这个恐怖平衡跟制衡，不会让财团或者是目前的政治利益者，或者是这个既得利益者呢，继续在不论是政治的版图上面，或者是社会的版图上面，再继续的受益下去。所以他觉得这个是美国跟加拿大一个非常不一样的地方。那他当然对于这个Meghan 跟 Harry 的这个访问呢，他当然立场上面由于他的背景也是比较鲜明一些，所以我想这跟这个上个礼拜 Jimmy 的访问呢，其实在某些程度上面是有一些 overlap 的。不过今天我想这个有一个不同的这个一个我们的受访者，他有不同的资历来告诉我们目前的这个话题他的一些见解，尤其是对于他自己本身是在年轻的族群当中，他是进行了常年的耕耘，他可以了解为什么年轻人对于皇室有这个就是等于是与生俱来的一个反感，应该就是说年轻人他们对于公权力的一个不愿意服从的一个心态，他是完全可以了解。但是他认为如果说教育，尤其在加拿大的教育制度可以真的非常这个 transparent 透明的来让年轻人知道到底君主制背后是有什么样子的含义，以及它是给了哪方面程度的一些政治权力上面的一个制衡的话呢，那目前我们所看到的对于这个君主制的一些这个比较负面的一些民调，他认为这是会有非常大的一个改变，而且他也就提到这是跟目前的政治的执政党他们自己的一些计划是有非常直接的关系的。好，所以我想这个今天我们的节目呢，就是再一次，这是我自己觉得非常有趣的一个话题。我想我们有的观众朋友可能觉得这真的是跟我无关哦，但是就是因为感觉上这君主好像是跟你无关，但是他在加拿大在这个钞票上面还有在硬币上面就是可以看到一个女皇，而且在学校里面呢，你也常常要学这个 Save the Queen 这样子的一些歌曲，所以在这个就像他说的，这个 Mr. Wade 他所说的，这是一个 liberal generation，目前的年轻人对于这样的旧制是可以说是平均起来半数以上或是多数都是持一个反对的心态底下呢，我自己是非常有兴趣想要知道这些机构，尤其是对于皇室是比较友善的机构他们对于保存皇室到底有的实际利益可以给出的，除了大家在情绪上面的一个喜爱之外呢，另外实质的可以给社会造成的一些贡献跟一些实质的一些交流。所以希望今天的这个访问，如果说您对于英国皇室也是非常的有兴趣，而且是在于他们实际工作上面到底是在做些什么，以及对于其他的大英国协可以造成什么样子的影响，以及在目前这个 Meghan 和 Harry 的事件不断发酵的情况之下，还会造成什么更多的影响的话呢？那我希望今天的访问跟上个礼拜的访问都可以带给您一些不同的观点。以上就是今天的华尔街论坛，我是维人，感谢您的收看，那我们就明天再见喽，拜拜。